spoke to a dear soul brother earlier this week, Johnny Vidacovich, and I was asking him about this one cat that he used to play with, and he dropped my next guest's name, and absolutely it just showered him with an incredible amount of compliments and gratitude about being able to really open his ears and hear music in a completely different way. This cat reared in New Orleans at Loyola University, but also came to New York at a time and made a lot of acquaintances with a lot of the heaviest cats, and still doing it today. Rodrigo Saenz, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you, Jake. Very, very happy to be here with you.
It's an honor, my friend. You know, I wanted you to talk about, just in general to the audience, your concept of the idea of you're in an improvisational group with a lot of trust, and, you know, you lose the downbeat collectively. But then because of that trust, after you go out, you all come back in at the same time. I mean, it's kind of one of the most euphoric things in music. And I wanted you to talk about your concept that any note can be the one.
Well, that's a very broad question, but I would say that personally, here in a solo, you really have to be listening to the time. Where is the time? And time can be flexible. Somebody said once that time is like a tree, that it moves in the wind, but its roots are deeply in the ground.
Yeah, I dig. Yeah.
In the ground. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it flows. And if you listen to any of the great ones, like for instance, one record that Johnny and I used to listen to a lot was Miles Davis. From the Four and More, there were two albums.
Absolutely, yes.
One cut, like for instance, that I love, I've listened to it a million times, with like Stella by Starlight, when they started in a very, very luscious ballad. And then at some point they double the time, but the form of the tune doesn't double, it stays the same. And then at some point, if you listen closely, well, not that closely, but it's very obvious, at some point when Herbie starts his solo, it's like Tony lays out. It lays out. It just stops playing. So it's just Herbie and Ron. And they're playing, and the time is there. It's like, it's there. You feel it. You feel it because these two cats are like giants, and you feel the time. And it feels like it's just flowing. It's not, it's hard to explain, but it's not defined by like a metronome or anything anywhere near that. And then at some point, Herbie goes da 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 da, and at that point, it's like he sets up the time again, going back to the double time feel that they played previously. And Tony comes in, and it's back. It's like magic. It's something that in a group, everybody has to be listening. You have to listen, and I find that there's a few musicians. Many of them really listen to what you're doing. And as a bass player, like for instance, I like to play certain notes to sort of kind of like a challenge to see if this one cat is listening, and I can tell right away if they are or not.
Yeah, I dig.
And excuse me, and it's important for musicians in general to really study, like ear training. You have to really, really train your ears. In the era of MTV, music has become very visual. But in my opinion, music has to come into your being through the ears. So that's important. And so going back to the one note, is that lick that Herbie plays is that one note. It starts with just one chord, and he does a chromatic thing. But that first note, from that little triadic, or not triadic, from that little sequence that he plays, it's at the beginning of a chorus, right after he had played that very luscious, kind of like free feel, goes right back in. So that particular lick, that's the note. That first note for my ears, that's a note that sets up the whole thing, and that's how I feel about it. Like, you have to listen. That's number one.
You know,
When,
I think it's Stanley Clark said something similar to me about Ron Carter being this big oak tree, rooted in the ground, but sort of, I don't want to say twisting in the wind, blowing in the wind, but going sort of lilting back and forth. But I wanted to read this quote to you from. I just did a couple interviews with the drummer Chester Thompson, and he said he's talking about Elvin. He said. I did try to emulate Elvin in his playing. It caused me to create an exercise practice technique. What amazed me about Elvin was that he played time, but it didn't depend on time. There was this pulse, this thing that you felt. There's not many other people I've heard that have done that and touched me in quite the same way. One of my favorite recordings was a bootleg cassette that I bought in Paris. It was the John Coltrane Quartet. Live. People are familiar with guys trading 4s or 8s or trade a whole chorus. The band would trade a chorus with Elvin. They would play down the whole form of a song. He would play the time feel of the song. But with him, you couldn't really pat your foot to it. You felt it clearly, but I was always amazed when they would all come back in. It was with such precision. I would be sitting there wondering how in the world would they know how to do that. Rodrigo, I wanted you to just talk about, in your experience, you're talking about this, playing time, but it didn't depend on time. It's this floating, living, breathing organism. What are the antecedents in a band that allow people to feel that pulse and ultimately be completely in tune with their ears so that it just feels so good and almost seems like magic when you come back in?
yeah, it's again, it's like time exists. Time is there, and like, first, when I first met Johnny years and years ago, he was the cat. He was a young cat, and he was like, I had never played with anybody like that. And we met, and I was playing bass, and it's like I could feel. We could feel each other. I was playing a walking thing, and then I would just kind of like go into like a free type of thing, and he would feel it right away. And it's hard to say. It's hard to say like what keeps it. It's a feel. It's something like that is like a metronome, but without being a metronome. It's not precise.
Exactly.
It expands like a little faster, a little slower, but it's always in line. And everybody has to feel that line, I would say. And that's what Johnny and I, when we played, it was like, it's there. It's there. We don't know how, or we can't explain it, but it's something that is like, it's moving right along. That's my opinion of it.
Did you grew up in New Orleans?
No, I was born and raised in Costa Rica.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I was very fortunate because my dad had been a musician in his younger years, and he had been a bass player. He taught himself how to play bass. And we were like my siblings and I'm the oldest of 5 siblings. We grew up in a household full of music. He played records all the time, from Beethoven to Bach to Benny Goodman to. He once got a hold of a record that was called Dixie by Dorsey, meaning Jimmy Dorsey,
wow,
clarinetist, saxophonist. More about that later.
Yeah.
But we used to listen to everything. And when I was 7 or 8, he started me on violin because he had been a frustrated violinist. And me being the oldest, he wanted me to play violin. But I fell in love with the trumpet when I saw the movie From Here to Eternity, and I saw Montgomery Clift's character playing taps for his buddy Frank Sinatra, Maggio, who had died. And I remember that. And I started with the trumpet when I was a teenager. I forgot the violin, but I was fortunate. My dad put me with a very good teacher, and we learned theory and sight singing and ear training and all that. So he developed my ears I was fortunate to have been born with good ears, but he helped develop my ears. And there, it just went from there. I picked up bass because he had been a bass player. My dad, he brought a bass home once, and I just started listening to Ray Brown, and he's the most logical bass player I ever heard. And I started copying, emulating his bass lines, and I just kind of put it all together for me, all the relationships with 2/5 chords and harmony. And all of a sudden, I'm playing bass. And I was a go-to cat in the entire city of San Jose, Costa Rica, which was not really big at that time, but I was getting gigs, and it just went from there. And I decided to move to the United. But before that, we had been listening to Al Hirt, and I moved to the States. We had been in New Orleans in the mid-60s, and I decided I wanted to come to the States to broaden my horizons musically, and I moved to New Orleans. And it went from there. That's where I met Johnny, and we used to be in a band with Loyola University. Had a big jazz band that was being used for the Saints games. And at the Saints games, we befriended Al Hirt's band, which played. During the game, we played. We traded. The band played, and Al Hirt's band would play, and I met those guys. And it so happens that Al Hirt was looking for a bass player, and I knew those guys, including Ellis Marsalis, who was a piano player, and they recommended me to play with Al. All of a sudden, here I am, and like fresh coming from Costa Rica, and I got a gig with Al Hirt. Okay, this was amazing. And talking about Jimmy Dorsey and his Dixie by Dorsey, I used to play that all the time, all those records, all 78s. And I learned those tunes. And all of a sudden, I'm playing these Dixieland tunes with Al Hirt. And he's looking and saying, where do you come from? Are you from Costa Rica? You know these tunes? It was truly amazing.
I was going to say, I did a few interviews with Alex Acuna, the drummer from Weather Report, percussionist. And he actually went to Puerto Rico when he came back from the States after working with Perez Parado. Now, he really said that Costa Rica didn't have much of a music vibe there. Is that, in terms of a live, were you basically shedding there, or how would you describe the regional sounds of Costa Rica when you were coming up?
Okay, basically the bands were like Latin pop, like the 60s start Latin pop, a little bit of salsa, a little bit of Latin, pop ballads and this and that, but they were not really trained musicians. However, that changed because my late uncle, he was the Secretary of Culture, and what he did, the symphony was in very bad shape, and so what he did, he imported or exported to Costa Rica. But 5 or 6 musicians were like a couple of good violinists, a percussionist, a couple of brass players and woodwinds, and he incorporated them into the orchestra. And what he did was very smart. He opened up auditions for young people to audition, and without any musical knowledge or anything, they checked their ears and they checked their attitudes, and all of a sudden they got all these kids interested in learning how to play the instruments, and they developed a youth symphony, which was very respectable, and it just went from there. Like fast forward to the present time, and let me tell you, I've been to Costa Rica a few times lately. And there's 3 or 4 bass players that I would play with anywhere in the world, man. We've done like little gigs and a couple of recordings, and these guys can play. And one of them actually went to University of Colorado and got a master's degree. He studied with a good friend of mine, Brad Good, great trumpet player, a great jazz teacher. He studied with him, and these guys, I'd go to battle with them anytime. So it has changed. It's definitely changed.
Oh, no doubt it's changed. The youth symphony, were you like playing string bass in that group, or what were you? No.
This was long after I came to the States. This was in the 70s.
In the 70s, I see. No, so when you were listening to those 78s and listening to Ray Brown, did you at a certain point recognize that to really grow your vocabulary and find your own voice, you had to move somewhere else. I'm just at that time in the '60s.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I knew that I could not develop whatever musical interests I had. Costa Rica was not the place, and it was just very limited. So I decided to come to the States, and I came to New Orleans because I knew people there, and I had a gig. Somebody gave me a gig, and I was going to be able to study with many more important people. And then I got into Loyola University. By that time, had developed a great music program and a very respectable jazz program. They had a great big band. And Johnny Vidacovich was the drummer, so I had the opportunity of playing with him in a small group. And then when he got in the big band, he kicked ass. Man. This guy was like, he drove that band like he was the cat. He was the cat in New Orleans at that time, man. He was 19 years old. He was like, a very charming young guy, very pleasant, very cool, very New Orleans South style, but he could jam with the best. And he still is. In my book, he's one of the best I've ever heard, Johnny.
Ever. I completely agree. I mean, he said this to me. I think you can riff on this. He said the Saints in the NFL started around 1967. In the beginning, they played at Tulane Stadium, and they needed a band, so they hired the Loyola Big Band. We had charts, and we played on the sidelines next to Al Hirt's quintet. Ernie Wheelwright and Ken Stabler would always come over and hang. They came to this one place I played called the Absinthe Bar on Bourbon Street. I had a blues gig with the Luther Camp Big Band. We played from about 1:30 to 5 a.m. Stabler and Wheelwright would come by the Absinthe Bar at 3:30 a.m. on a Saturday night before the game, and they'd be hanging hard. Hanging from the rafters. These were big dudes. They'd trap you in a corner and be carrying on. I'm thinking, don't these cats have to be on the field at 10 a.m.? I mean, can you just, first of all, can you talk about that vibe? I mean, to me, there's nothing more scintillating than being at a football game and seeing like a live burning band. And I just am curious about, did you ever play in that smaller combo at Tulane Stadium, or was it always the Loyola Big Band?
No, it was always the Loyola Big Band. It was in the fall of '69 when I first started attending. I had come to the States to go to college to learn music, but it took me a couple of years. But in fall of '69, that's when I enrolled in Loyola, and I became the bass player in the big band. And that's when I started playing, when we were playing the Saenz games. And that's where I met, it was Pee Wee Spitlera, brilliant clarinetist with Al Hirt. And he had Ellis Marsalis was playing piano, and there was no bass. There was an organ player, the name escapes me, and
wow,
had a drummer, but it was like Al was very pop, a lot of pop in the '60s. Okay, he always said that I would play to be a jazz trumpeter, but I beg to differ, man. I heard him play some stuff that was just like. Plus the knowledge of the horn and his phrases, I was in awe. But anyway, at the beginning of 1970, Al decided to change his format and go back to his Dixieland roots. And that's where I fell in. And so it was me on bass. Ellis Marsalis was playing piano. I learned a lot from Ellis, man. I have stories, but
no, I mean, I did an amazing. I'm really touched that you. Ellis and I caught a great. I mean, that dude is the best. As far as I'm concerned, he is the serious Marsalis. I know his sons are great, but Ellis, man, going way back. I love that cat.
He was a great educator. See, quick story. When I went to a rehearsal with Al's band, and he brought Winton and Branford. They were little boys. They were like Winton was 8 years old and Branford was 10. So I know those guys since then. And I still talk to Winton, occasionally. But when then Ellis, unfortunately, we lost him 4 years ago.
Yeah.
But I used to call him 2-3 times a year. We used to talk and reminisce and stuff. But going back to the question, that's it was always the big band at Loyola. I mean, at Saenz games, it was always the big band. It was never a small group. The small group was the house group.
I really want you to talk. This is so scintillating for me because, I mean, in '69, I mean, it was really at that point in music. If you really want to just sort of paint with a broad brush, I remember Tootie Heath in one of our interviews told me, well, he was with Herbie at the time, and they were playing on the same bills as Iron Butterfly, which is so ridiculous. That's basically where music was in '60. That's how hot it was. And I'm just curious, like when you talk about the concepts of that small band at Loyola with you and Johnny, can you talk about was Angel Trosclair in that group too, or no?
Angel Trosclair was a vocalist in the big band. But as far as small group, we kind of formed like small groups within the big band. I was playing bass drum, we played drums, and I forget who played piano. And Angel was a vocalist, which Angel, by the way, also is a great pianist. So this is a one person that there are a few people on this planet that know more tunes than Angel Trosclair. She knows tunes like that haven't been written yet. And I haven't seen her a couple of years. But she's doing great. Well, part of a group. There was another cat, Charlie Brent.
Oh my God! No, that was. I mean, he was the savant. He and Jocko. He taught Jocko a lot of shit.
That's right. I know stories about that because Charlie was a music education major. But he became the arranger with that Loyola Big Band. He wrote a lot of charts.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking great charts. When I first walked in on that band, I've never been a great reader, but I kind of like did my best. But some of the stuff that he was writing, I was like, whoa. And then he left to go with Wayne Cochran and the CC writers. And from time to time, like guys in the Loyola band would go with Wayne. And Charlie told me the story about how he met Jocko. And I can tell you very quickly. He says that one time the bass player quit. And so, oh my God, what are we going to do? And this kid in cutoff jeans shows up and says, I can play your stuff. So, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And he got out there and he kicked the, out of the first set. And Charlie and Wayne said, oh my God, grab him. And he says, I don't know the second set yet, but I can learn this. And forget it, you got the gig. And Charlie, being an educator he put Jocko through like 2 or 3 serious theory books. And we all know that Jocko was a very, how should I say, hyper. He was full of energy. And what he did, he would stay up and just practice. And I heard stories that nobody wanted to room with him because, like, you'd be sleeping and all of a sudden you get earphones in your head say, hey, check this graph out, man. He would just, and all that stuff. And it got to the point that Charlie said, I got to leave the band because it was such a love. Charlie was playing guitar and Jocko was playing bass, and they had a very good drummer. And Charlie said, I got to leave. I got to quit. Because it was like such a love affair when you have a special person that says, I'm leaving you because I would not stand you leaving me. This is Charlie's words. And he left the band. And then Jocko became Jocko. That's a true story.
Well, this is from my interview with a guy you probably know, Alan Robinson. He was in he was in Wayne Cochran's band. He said Charlie Brent was the musical arranger for Wayne, and Jocko learned most of his voicings and a lot of his earliest musical education from hanging out with Charlie Brent. Jocko wrote his first compositions while he was in Wayne's band. Charlie had a little Casio piano, and he'd be writing music, and Jocko would be in the room with his bass, and he would be standing over Charlie listening to all the voicings. Yeah. Charlie used to make cassettes for me. I would hang out in his room and put on headphones and listen to this music that Charlie gave me to listen to. I'd be playing these ostinato rhythm exercises. Jocko couldn't tell what I was listening to, but he could hear these rhythms that I would play on and on and on. The tempos would change and the rhythms would change, and when he would use that as a metronome and play all these ostinatos over these voicings that Charlie was playing while he was writing out chords for the arrangements he was making. It was like a melting pot. One day I happened to be in the room hanging somewhere in Indiana. We look over and see Jocko literally, this is 1972, literally pulling the frets out of his bass.
Yeah.
Charlie tried to explain to him that he was crazy, but Jocko always had a sound in his head. He was very compulsive guy, he said. I think that's a good word. And when he got something in his mind, he just did it. Anyway, I love that you're... this stuff goes so far... What was the first gig? What was the gig that got you to New Orleans?
Okay, there was a pianist in Costa Rica who he had been in Mexico, and he returned to Costa Rica. He had made a name for himself in Mexico. There was a composer, a songwriter in Mexico named Agustin Lara. He's an old timer, and he had been mentored. This guy, his name was Vernon Hine. His grandmother was a great classical pianist, and his father had been a pop pianist, but a good player. And Vernon, they call him Pibe, P-I-B-E, which in Argentinian slang means kid, like, so like Pibe Hine. And he came back to Costa Rica. He went back to Costa Rica, and he started gigging. And this bass player was a Panamanian fellow. His name was Eugene Wright. He was my father's friend. He was playing bass with him. He was the only guy at that time who could be able to gig with Pibe. So I used to listen to him a lot. And then when some time passed and I was already playing bass, and this man, he got sick, terminally ill, and he passed. And then all of a sudden I moved in. I got his gig. And so I started playing with Pibe, and Pibe had a connection in New Orleans, and he wanted to move to New Orleans, and he was able to get me on the deal to go, the two of us, to go to a club in New Orleans, and the club owners actually did an affidavit, the way it was done back then, immigration-wise. And we filled an affidavit, and it was all kosher, and we came to the States. And there was a gig in New Orleans, right on Canal Street. And we played there for a while. And then we met some other people that were more like Anglo-American players. The gig that we were doing was a Latin gig, but then we met some American players, more jazz-oriented, at a club down the street. That's where I met Johnny. But before that, there were some really good players in there. And I made friends with them, and I learned a lot from them. And we were friends until most of them are gone already. But the first gig was that, at a Latin club in New Orleans. In fact, Johnny and I talk about that club because there was I'm sure you've heard of Al Balletto, of course.
I mean, it's just so funny because I mean, literally 3 days ago, I'm helping this doctor organize his vinyl collection, and I mean, it's this avant-garde jazz, blues, classical, and I pull out Coach's Choice from Studio in the Country, Al Balletto with John. I mean, it was just insane. So of course, I mean, Balletto Playboy Club, yeah, of course.
Mm-hmm. Al Balletto, Johnny told me a funny story about that club. That at one time Al was arrested because this is how things were in the South, probably in the 50s. When Al Balletto was arrested at that club because he brought in a black player on the stage, and he was arrested for that.
I'm not, you know, it's Charlie Neville sent me a poster from New Orleans in the 50s. It just said, you know, attention white parents, don't let your kids listen to this, you know, black radio. I mean, it was very. What was the? Do you remember the name of the Latin club that you played at?
Yeah, when I played, it was called Mocambo.
Mocambo.
Like remember the movie Mocambo?
Yeah.
But with a C, Mocambo. It was a nice club, you know. It was like they had a dance floor and they had a band, and there we joined that band, and it just went from there. But yeah, New Orleans in those days, man. We had visited New Orleans in the summer of '66, and I went into one of the big department stores, and I was floored because I saw like water fountains, and right above the water fountains, and see a sign that said "white only." And I didn't come from that type of culture. So what does this mean? You know, what do you mean white only? And then I learned. And they had a bar that we used to go to. I forget the name of it. But it had a bar. It was a long bar. It looked like almost like a really funky old west kind of bar, and it was long, but it was on a corner, so it was long along. And they had like three guns, one at each end and one in the middle, and they had a window on the side. That's where the black people go. It was like what they call a packaged liquor in New Orleans, and
sure.
you go into a store, you buy a bottle. So they had a package. The people who came, the black people who came by liquor, had to do it from the window. Yeah, it was very, very weird, man. The 60s.
You know, just because you're light, you have a lighter skin tone. How did you fit into that segregation? How were you treated?
Well, funny you should ask, because I don't know. My feeling is that I don't particularly look like Hispanic too much. Maybe.
No, you don't at all. No.
However, my father, my grandmother, my father's mother was an indigenous from Central America.
Wow.
Nobody remembers her because she passed when my dad was like.
That's huge, man. That's huge.
Yeah, and my father had a beautiful olive skin, but my mother had very fair skin, and she was like more. She had green eyes and very fair skin, and I took more after her. Some of my siblings were a little bit darker, more olive type skin, but I fit okay, you know. Like, but I'll tell you, there were stories like I experienced racism within. I don't know if I should say this, but it's in the past and it doesn't matter.
No, riff on it, man.
Part of history.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was okay. Ellis, he was black. And he and I used to room together because I was Hispanic and Ellis was black. And then the trombone player and the drummer were Italian, and they roomed together. But I felt a lot of racism from the band, not from Al, never from Al, but from these two guys, a drummer. I felt racism from him. But to me, it didn't mean anything. I was called names, and the word "spick" comes to mind.
Yes,
you know,
yes.
He used to call me, you know, but to me, it didn't mean anything because, okay, great, yes, spick. But you know, even I don't know. It's just part of growing up, I guess. Part of.
I want you to talk. When you say you experienced, I mean, this was a serious band. I mean, what was the what did it was it like a kind of a microaggression stuff, or I mean they'd call you slurs, but did it come out in like day-to-day life that you felt this racism? I'm just curious because you know I remember Cal Jader. I went on this real trip right when I started my show, and it wound up culminating in an last interview ever with Dave Brubeck. But before that, I interviewed John Hurd, Dick Burke, Mike Wolf, all these guys that were in Cal's band in the early 70s. And Dick was incredibly obese. John Hurd had a stuttering problem. Mike Wolf had Tourette's syndrome. Cal Jader was a drunk, like beyond alcoholic. They all kind of made fun of each other. And I'm not going to make light of racism because it is the original sin of this country, and it has been here and it's been very pervasive for many, many hundreds of years. But it just seemed to me like when you said, I don't care, I don't even know what that word spick means. Do you feel like, especially when you think about today, I'm not justifying it, but did people take things less seriously? Did people poke fun at their ethnicity? Did people, just looking back at that band, all those guys made fun of each other, and no one took it that personally. And I just wonder what you think about, like, and it just sort of triggered it because you said, I didn't know what that word meant. I didn't care what that word meant. And yet we're so hung up on words now. It's so inflammatory. The minute you say something, you could potentially get canceled, ostracized, and sometimes it's deserved. But I just feel like I'm curious about how much, Rodrigo Saenz, the bottom line is, talk about this motto if it relates to you. You take what you do very seriously, but you don't take yourself that seriously.
Well, it didn't bother me because I had never felt racism. And in all fairness, a lot of these guys, like, they would call each other like Italian slurs, and it went on. But I was a new kid on the block,
Right.
And I was, maybe there was some jealousy because Al really took a liking to me, and we got along really well, and he helped me out. He gave me a trumpet. I still have it, and
Wow.
and so on, But that's how it was back then, It's just like you just roll with it, Bottom line, really. And but there's another great story, man.
Please.
This is my best music story.
Please.
I was at a club in New Orleans. It was a pretty nice club, man. It was like a small theater, and the seating, you could see the band from anywhere in the club. And behind the club, towards the back, there was a bar, nice sized bar. And Al used to book, acts, not big name acts, but he used to book like Gene Krupa and Jimmy Smith. And actually, the first Buddy Rich big band, which had Ernie Watts in it in the late 60s.
My hero, man.
Yeah.
I love Ernie, I love Ernie so much. I can't believe he was. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no. What happened was that he booked that band. I heard that band in the club. He used to book acts like that, and one time he booked Duke Ellington with the big band for 2 weeks. Okay, so here we are. Oh my God, Duke Ellington, and I grew up. That was Mother'sville to me, and after every show, we were hanging out in the back, and I got to hang out with all those heroes of Paul Gonzalez.
Oh, my God.
Cootie Williams, Cat Anderson, Duke, of course, all those guys. Harry Carney, they were all hanging out. We're all hanging around the back. Mercer was there, all hanging out. It was like a hang for 2 weeks, and I befriended Joe Benjamin. Who was a bass player, great bass player, a real gentleman. And what happened was that I befriended him, and he heard me play with Al, because Al was there, so it was like big 2 weeks, like Al heard with the band. Or maybe he played, I don't remember, but he heard me play with the group. And we became friends. He liked my playing, this and that. And one night, I'm sitting there, I was every night, like, listening, wow. And they started playing Take the A Train. Right? Take the A Train. And something got into me. And I sprung out of my seat. I was like maybe 10 feet away from Joe, the bass player. I went right behind and said, Joe, let me play this tune, man. I go, that, really big cojones. And I went right behind Joe. I said, Joe, let me play this tune. Yeah, sure, man. And he gave me the bass, and I got to play Take the A Train with Duke Ellington.
Dude, I'm sorry. That we could end the interview right now. That's it, man. That's it. But it's also just like, I don't know, man. That epitomizes jazz to me, man. It's like communal, and at the same time, Joe Benjamin wasn't worried at all about. He just was like, "Yo, man, here you go, take it up, man. It's your time,
Yeah, Duke looked at me he was a little below that, and he looked at me and said, all right, yeah, play it, man.
My God.
When I told my dad that, man, that was when I told Dad, I got to get my dad hurt. He almost died, really. Calling to Costa Rica, and I told him that he almost died. But, and then it gets better, because that year, the same year, Duke Ellington's orchestra went to Costa Rica for one concert, for one night. And Duke was my dad's hero, one of his 4 or 5 top heroes, like him and Celia Cruz and Marian Anderson and Ella Fitzgerald and Duke Ellington. Those were his cats. And when I told him that story, he went right up to Joe. And he started to, oh, yeah. So they made friends that night after the gig. They went to the after party. There's a picture of my dad with like playing piano. My dad's holding a drink like in heaven, right? And he took. I guess the band had a road manager or something. Got all the luggage, instruments, everything. They took care of that, and the guys just showed up. So they went to I think Joe, my dad, and a couple other guys. They went to this all-night outdoor coffee shop in San Jose, right smack in the center of San Jose. They just went to hang out until it was time to catch the plane, and my dad took them to the airport.
Wow.
And I sent a Christmas card to Joe, Merry Christmas, and, thank you for being so nice to my dad. He loved it. He really was a great experience for him. And he wrote back to me because the pleasure was mine. Yeah.
These guys were beyond class, man. I mean, this is making my day, man.
Well, good. I'm glad.
Did you have a chance to, with Ellis, when I interviewed him, the reason I even got a chance to interview Ellis was because he was in a band with a legendary drummer who I think is still with us. I pray he's still with us, Lee Charlton. And they were in a group with John Pierce and a few other cats. I think Charlie Hayden's brother was in the band. And Ellis it was a mixed race band. So when they were driving through Texas and stuff, they'd have to drive Ellis to the black part of town for him to stay for the night.
Wow.
Yeah, literally. It was. I'm just curious about your experiences. When was your first real sort of road or touring experience? Did you play any of the Chitlin circuit in the southeast part of the United States?
You mean like with Al?
I'm just saying, any gig, because, Charlie Neville went with Dave Bartholomew and, Alan Toussaint. And this is a little before your time, but I'm talking about, did you were you able to sing for your supper in New Orleans as a live musician, or did you do some road touring? What was your first road experience?
Well, I honestly never did a lot of touring. What had happened was, when I first came to the States, then my brother joined me, and we had a quartet. And the quartet fell apart, and we moved to St. Louis. Then I followed him, and we went to St. Movie. I had a Chevy convertible.
Whoa,
63
whoa, dude. Whoa.
Yeah. And then in St. Louis, we were with a piano player, and there was no more work. The work dried up, and he's looking for work. I'm trying throughout the country. And he got a gig in Seattle, Washington, man.
Your brother did?
No, this piano player.
Yeah.
He was like a society player who had a name, made a name for himself in the late 50s and the 60s. So anyway, he got a gig in Seattle. Here I am, my brother, who was, at that time, he was like 20 years old. I was like 21, man. We got in a convertible with all our belongings, and we drove from St. Louis, Missouri to Seattle, Washington.
My God.
No insurance, and this car. To us, it was like, a big deal.
Yeah, right. No. You were cast your fate to the wind,
Yeah, man. And we made it to Seattle. We stayed there for about 4 months. We did some gigging. And then my brother got some work back in Missouri, and he took a train back. And I stayed in Seattle, and the guy in New Orleans, it was a place called The Bistro, where I met Johnny. It was a great club. And the owner, when I left, said, listen, if you ever need a gig, call me. I'll get you work. Okay. So I had no work. So I called him up. So put your money where your mouth is. He said, okay, come on down. I got a gig for you. And he fired the bass player in the band, and he hired me. And they gave him a 2-week notice. And I drove from Seattle to L.A., made up with a friend of mine from the old days of high school in Costa Rica. And I spent a little time with him. And that was the first time. I had never smoked pot in my life. Okay? And this guy had been through it all, man. And he had some hash. Some very, very serious hash.
Oh boy.
And yeah, oh boy is right.
You must have gone to the moon, man.
Bro, it gets a lot better because what happened was like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I can't do this. And he talked me into it. Yeah, well, you're tricking. You still thinking because your dad won't let you do it, this and that. Why don't you be a man? So you know what? Let me try that, man. And I took a couple of hits. And next thing I know, I left. It was nighttime. Next thing I know, I'm at the border with Tijuana.
No way.
I stopped there, man. So, oh my God, where am I? And the border officer comes to me and says, "What are you doing here?" "Well, I'm on my way to New Orleans." "Are you okay?" I said, "No, I'm just a little tired." "Well, you better get some rest, man." I didn't have anything on me.
Thank God. You drove to the border. You drove to the border.
I drove to the border. I was supposed to make a left turn.
Yeah, I mean, dude, I cannot. There were no good highway signs back then, man. You were
man, and I made it to New Orleans, and I started working. This is early '69, in March of '69. That's when I met Vidacovich, man.
This is so beautiful. So, I mean, did you? This is so legendary. I mean, did you wind up with? Obviously, you met Johnny. At that time, Johnny was going to. I forget the name, but he was going to see David Lee and George Davis and playing with the Mardi Gras Indians. I mean, how much did you sort of infiltrate the entire New Orleans scene, or was Rodrigo Saenz? You kind of just went to the beat of your own drum.
Yeah, here's what happened. I got back to New Orleans, and before I had left New Orleans in '68, I had been doing a gig on Sunday nights at this place called the Bistro. It was a really cute little club.
The Bistro, that's great.
Yeah, Sunday night with a great piano player named Dave West. He's gone. And a drummer. And I left. When I came back, the gig still existed. And what happened was that it was Johnny playing drums.
Oh, man.
And then I said, I'm back in town. I said, okay, so then I got the gig. That's where I met the first night we played. I looked at him. And he looked at me and said, "I love you." Love at first sight, man. Johnny was 19 years old, living at home, in college, very handsome guy, very charming, and he was cocky as the day is long, man.
Damn.
And he played, it was like, you could tell that he was heavily influenced, which nothing wrong, by Tony Williams.
Well, he was, because I think, because you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when he told me this week about, I mean, he had mentioned your name a few years ago, and he jarred my memory. But when we've done so many interviews for a book that is going to be coming out hopefully next year about Johnny, and he kept talking about 4 and more, and so I'm wondering, had he already? Did you? Because he said you guys spent hours. Inches from these 8-inch speakers. Would you say that was he already aware of that album, or was that stuff that you sort of hipped him to?
I think it was mutual. We started listening to that. I had been listening a lot to Scott LaFaro and Bill Evans and the Village Vanguard album.
Oh my God!
A few others.
Oh my God!
And like Waltz with Debbie and all that. And then Johnny and I became friends, and I remember. Like he used to come. I had like a little place like off the campus of Loyola. It's like an upstairs little 2-room little joint that I had like when I was going to school. And I remember one Sunday, he says, "Hey man, I called on Sunday like around 1 o'clock. What you doing?" I said, "Oh, not much, man. I think I want to smoke me some weed." And I said, "Oh shit, man. Well, bring it down, man. Bring it on. Bring it on, baby." So he came to my place, and we smoked a little bit, and then I started. This time it was better because now I was grounded.
Yeah, thank God you weren't driving anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, I was grounded in my place with a friend, a young friend, a new friend, and we started listening, and it was different. Then we kind of developed like a listening rapport, so to speak. where I would he was living with his parents. And his parents had a beautiful home in a very nice area of town, kind of like northwest of New Orleans. And he had his own bedroom, but he also had a spare room where he had a stereo, and he had a beautiful Fisher, one of those classic Fisher amplifiers with great speakers.
Oh yeah.
He made sure that as a great musician that he is, he had a good sound system. So we used to go there. We listened to a lot of stuff. I had never heard of Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and all of a sudden I started playing. Oh my God! It was like we became like really plugged into each other as far as listening to stuff and breaking down stuff, and then what happened was I got the gig at the place, the bistro, like 6 nights a week, and he started doing that gig. So musically, we grew together very nicely. And there was a trumpet player. His name was, sadly, Warren Luning. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
No, I don't know that name.
Warren Luning had been a child prodigy. He was discovered by Lawrence Welk.
Wow.
Lawrence Welk took him to L.A. and put him in the Kitty Band. And what happened was that he put him through college, UCLA, I think it was, or USC, one of the two, to study music. And then he went into service. But he was by the time I met him, he was about 4 years older than me. By the time I met him, he was already ridiculous. One of the best trumpet players I've ever heard. And great musician. And I was just starting out to really get into the meat and potatoes of music. The theory, the harmony, and this and that, attempting to arrange, write arrangements and stuff. And Warren very calmly, kind of like tutored me. He mentored me all of 1969. It's the best year that I've had hands-on ever in my life.
Wow.
And then he just, Warren, at the end of 69, he got married, and he moved to the West Coast, and the rest is history. He became like one of the top 5 studio trumpet players in L.A.
Really? It's funny because
yeah.
I've interviewed Gary Grant and Chuck Finley. I don't remember. I have to go back and look at that name because I don't recognize.
No, he's right in there with them, man. He did a lot of gig with a lot of work with Patrick Williams.
Sure.
He did some. When I used to go to the coast once in a while, and he would call him, and so, well, give me your phone number, and I'll call you and see what we'll do something. So, okay. And sure enough, the phone would ring. I said, "Hey, let's go have breakfast." Okay, great. So we had breakfast. So what are you doing this afternoon? So nothing. I was visiting another friend. So nothing. So you want to go to a record day? I said, no. Yeah, of course, man. So okay, meet me here. And he took me to Alf Clausen. Probably the name doesn't ring a bell, but Alf Clausen did a recording. Did all the music to the movie The Simpsons and a bunch of other stuff. And this one time he was doing his music.
Wow.
So I went there. I walked in that studio. I thought I'd walked in heaven. All those guys, Chuck Finley, Berghoff.
Dude, Chuck Berghofer is still swinging his ass off. It's unreal.
Yeah. All these guys, man, were there. And this first chart, one take, done. Yeah. Warren used to tell me, you know what, man, with these cats, usually the first take is the best. Because everybody's sharp, ready, boom.
I love that attitude. So I remember it's so true because I remember Shelly Manne. I've interviewed a bunch of guys from his early 70s band, and it was a wild experimental album called Mask, and it was guys like kind of an unheralded group of guys, but I remember interviewing a bunch of them, and Shelly was like, okay, listen, I got the studio for 3 days. First day, we're going to go in. We're going to just shed the tunes. And they had been playing these tunes live at the Manhole every night. I don't know. Back then it was Herbie would come in and play a set. Then Shelley's band would play a set. There was no intermission. It was set. And so he told the band, first day we're just going to shed. And then the next 2 days we're going to spend recording. And so he got everybody relaxed. And they played this raw, basically 1 take, 2 takes maybe of these tunes. And after the first day, Shelley said, okay, we're done. No need to come back in. And the guys freaked out. They're like, I could have played that solo better, man. They were, but the truth is, to a man, they all said, Shelley was right. The music was fresh. It was burning. It was on fire. But he had to do a little Zen trickery. Now those studio cats, the Warren Lurings and the Chuck Finley, those guys could read flypaper in 1 take and you're done. These guys just this is the most burning, weird. It's the funkiest I've ever heard Shelley play drums. But the point is, first take, man. That's where it's at.
Yeah.
Do you? I'm curious about. I am now obsessed with Rodrigo Saenz' studio career. When was your first session?
Well, I've never been much of a studio instrumentalist because I something happened with me with my music. I always wanted to play trumpet, but I was made into a bass player. I went through Berkeley as a bass player, but never really applied myself to the bass or the trumpet.
Wow.
So I was never really a good reader. And then I came to New York. I did a bunch of gigs here and there, like from weddings to whatever. It was New York, got to survive. And I did a couple of recordings here and there, but not really, never really did do a lot of session work. Like somebody like Johnny, man, he's. I'm not.
No, Rodrigo. No, I'm talking. You're not. Listen, Ron Carter, Ray Brown. I get it. I mean,
I never was.
No, but I'm curious about your first. Was maybe even in New Orleans? Was it a Suds and Duds commercial? Was it what was your first recording session? Even if it was a demo.
Well, I can't really remember to those back to back then, but I do have another aspect of my life. Which
yes.
I was always interested in singing.
Yeah.
And I've been told that I have a good voice, but my voice was not in a good place. In other words, there was no support.
Right.
And in 1978, one of my youngest sibling, my youngest brother, who had been a singer, an aspiring classical singer, turned me on to a guy who was in New York. So Rodrigo, check him out. This guy is good. So I checked him out, and I took a year's worth of lessons with him. And I was able to place my voice where I wanted it. Okay. And then I explored the possibility of getting into. This is good. Yeah, I remember. The possibility of doing some vocal work in the studio. Okay. So there was a whole area of Spanish commercials in New York that was opening up really well. And there were not that many singers, a lot of salsa singers and whatnot, but there were not that many singers that could walk in the studio, okay, here's the music, I sing it. I could do that.
Wow.
So, yeah, thanks to my dad and his saltfish class when I was very young. Okay. It paid off. So what happened was I looked around in the early 1982 to see who was doing these commercials. And I got the name, I hope you've heard, or maybe you haven't, named Chico O'Farrell.
Of course.
Oh, okay. Chico O'Farrell was doing commercials, amongst many other things, a lot of music work that was doing in New York, but he was doing commercials, And I called him up. The sweetest man you ever want to know. I called him up, and I was like, "Hi, Chico, man." But he was a hero, man. Oh, my God, I can't believe I'm talking to Chico O'Farrell. I was listening to him with Manteca and all that stuff when I was a teenager. And here I am talking to him, sweetest man. So I'm interested in doing this. Okay, great. Or Chico, blah, blah, blah. Cool Cuban slang, right? Really nice. I said, go, send me a demo. I said, oh, God, okay. So I said, what am I going to do? So I just booked the studio, brought in a piano player and a drummer, and I played bass. And I recorded like 3 vocal tunes. Yeah, it came out okay. You know, I sent it to him. And I followed up. I said, Chico, did you get the tape? I said, yeah, I heard it. It sounded really good. I'll be calling you. Okay, thank you. Yeah, right, you'll be calling me. Yeah, okay. Sure enough, sometime later, not too long, not too much after that, phone rings. Hi, my name is so-and-so, and I'm going to see if you'll be available to do a session for Chico Farrell on June 27th from 2 to 4. And here I am, trying to be important. I said, well, let me look at my book. Hold on a second. I see how. Yeah, 2 to 4 would work. I said, okay, such a studio. I'll see you then. Okay, great. I almost went through the roof. Chico O'Farrell gave me a gig. A gig. I could not believe it, man. That morning, and I got up and went to AFTRA, and I joined AFTRA. So I walked into that studio. I was already a union member, and the rest is history because I did a lot of work doing commercials as a vocalist. And some solos, you know, a couple of solos. But I did okay with that. I did okay. That was my studio work has been mostly as a vocalist.
And it was still a I know it was at the tail end, but you still caught that sort of at least a decade of good studio work before it really dried up.
Oh yeah, pretty much. And then the other part of my studio work was as a voiceover person. I had an account. I don't think it exists where you are, but it's called ShopRite. But it's mostly in the Northeast.
No, I'm a Long Island cat. I used to go to ShopRite.
Oh.
Come on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
For something like 20 plus years, man. I had a Spanish account for all the commercials of ShopRite.
Oh my gosh.
As a voiceover person. That was pretty good because I was doing that because I in the early 90s, music was drying up and everything else was drying up. I said, well, I got to shift gears, man. And I said, I need to do something else. I already had a wife and 2 kids and a house, you know, that I had to, you know, keep up. And I said, what else can I do that is not going to require for me to go to school and study and work out with any experience? What can I do? So, well, let's see, I speak 2 languages. So, okay. So I went from there. I just made some phone calls to try to do interpretation work in Spanish, English, Spanish. And I started getting work as an interpreter, as a Spanish, English, Spanish interpreter.
That's beautiful.
And then it went from there because, like, I took the test. Gave me certification at the state level in New York State Supreme Court. So now I was qualified to be an interpreter in the New York State courts. And 28 years later, I just retired about 4 months ago. I retired, but I made my living as an interpreter.
That's so unbelievable, man.
You know, that's just, I shifted gears. And I've been, in the meantime, I was still doing gigs, but now I was picking and choosing gigs that I was doing because I had a living.
Yeah, you weren't starving to death anymore, yeah.
Yeah, and I started doing gigs and you know, just having fun and going to jam sessions and so on. But that's what I've been doing for the past, since 1996, pretty much.
I want to go back for a minute, and you can riff. I'm just hear me out, and then I'd love to get your take on this because 61, you had Claire Fisher and Gary Peacock and Gene Stone doing pretty sophisticated trio work on the West Coast, and then obviously you had Bill Evans and LaFaro and Motion doing the Vanguard sessions. And I remember Reggie Workman, when I interviewed him, he talked about could have been Roy Haynes or Mickey Roker or Max Roach, Tony Williams, didn't matter. Every one of those guys had their own character symbol. They had their own signature sound on the cymbal. And he said, you know, I could go to a jazz set today, and it's a 45-minute set, and it's burning, and the drummer will not touch the cymbals. And when I listened back to that Vanguard with LaFaro and Motion, obviously LaFaro is doing some very incredibly inventive progressive stuff, but every time I listen to that album on cassette, it doesn't ever sound the same way once, Rodrigo. It's always different. And I wonder how much, when you were enthralled with that stuff, when you were really listening to that stuff heavily, how much of it had to do with the fact that Motion had a distinct cymbal character that allowed the music to sort of almost take on, I don't want to say Sufi, but it was almost a mystical sort of vibe. How much of that had to do with his cymbal character, and how much of Johnny's cymbal character makes him a standout legendary drummer to this day?
Oh, I've heard Johnny say something like that when he hits a cymbal, he sees like, it becomes a visual thing.
Right, yeah, color, yeah.
Yeah, he sees colors. He sees
like tastes and things, yeah.
Yeah, like it's almost like a champagne bubbles, or maybe soap bubbles, that kind of thing. He has said that, and it's funny. Funny you should say that because I started playing drums or learning how to play the drums, and I took a lesson with Johnny not too long ago.
Wow.
But what happened was that all my years, we used to fool around when we had little bands. The guy was a drummer, but we would sit in the drums and fool around with it, and just for fun. But in December of last year, I was at a jam session, and for some reason there was only one drummer, and he got up to take a break, and he took a break. So I sat on the drums and I started playing ride, but that's all I could do, ride and hi-hat. But at least I could keep time. And then I got off and I said, oh man, this is something that I should explore because I've never really done anything with the drums. And fast forward, I went and got me some drums and a couple of cymbals, and I've been practicing, and it has opened like a good friend of mine, his name is Jeff Gans, incredible bass player, but he started out as a drummer, and years later he went back to the drums, and I played a gig with him on drums, me playing bass, and the guy is like ridiculous, great on both instruments, but we spoke about that recently. He said, man, when you play drums, it's going to make your other instruments, if you play other instruments, it's going to be better. But back to the cymbals thing, I have 3 cymbals, and it's like, I think the bottom line is that every cymbal, you can manufacture 100 18-inch K zildjians in a row, bam, 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 100. They're all going to sound different. They're all going to sound different.
Right.
And it's like, I don't know what it means, but I guess it's a matter of like Ellis Marsalis told me a story once, and the worst thing you can do is go out with a drummer when he's shopping for cymbals. And it boils down to that is every cymbal has a character. And Paul Motion, he had his own cymbals, like everybody else. Like Tony Williams had a K zildjian that was legendary, man. You hear that thing like ding, ding, ding. It's like that ping you cannot hear. Or maybe you could hear it somewhere else in another cymbal. But it's like every cymbal has its own character, and every drummer, all the great ones, from Eldon to Tony to Max, all of those, they have always, I think, their identity boils down to the drums. To the cymbals, to whatever cymbals they have. And I would think that if you're a drummer, you have a particular cymbal, it gets to the point where you learn just how to hit it. It's like this is part of your life. Mm-hmm. It's like, you hit it, and like with these cymbals that I have, I find a place, oh yeah, it's a sweet spot, man. And I'm hearing myself, with a little bit of a sound, whatever little technique I have, and ding, 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 and I go to the other cymbal, and I start to hear the difference. And I could see myself maybe 5 years from now, I don't know, to step on the stage and play drums and be able to say, okay, well, that's my cymbal. You know, now I'm feeling it. I think that's part of the explanation, don't you think? I mean,
just because it just popped into my head because the two guys that Workman and then the late great, and when I interviewed him, another guy Johnny played with quite a bit was Joe Sample, and he just it's interesting how he talks about I'm 46, but even guys in their 50s, he said they do not know, they don't seem to understand or recognize the colors and the sort of sonic expansion and the individualism that the cymbals have, and and it's something that, especially when we're talking about it in the context of jazz, and it's one of those things where, it was just revelatory to me that here's Reggie Workman talking about going to see some incredibly high level players, and the drummer doesn't touch the cymbals the entire set, in a jazz setting. So it's just, yeah, I mean, and so and maybe that has to do with just the fact that, when you came to the States, Rodrigo, jazz was still a popular music. It was popular. And we've got, and then by the 80s, we got into, heavy hair metal and heavy rock and a lot, and then essentially, the drums went from an accompanist instrument with like Morello and Max Roach, beautiful melodic stuff, but an accompanist instrument to the loudest instrument. So all of a sudden it was about generating, like, how loud can you play? And the cymbals, which are great for dynamics and great for that lilting quality of driving the pulse and stuff, that seem to be almost obsolete. And it's one of those things that, as you keep shedding on the drums, always make it a point to dance on those cymbals, man.
Oh yeah. It's probably like different areas, like, of the cymbals.
Yeah, exactly. But I like how you talked about it's the same thing with like when they made Hammond B3s. I mean, they were all all the stuff inside those things was just slightly different, which is why Groove Holmes sounds different than Jimmy Smith, and then all these guys that were playing those things. Whereas now you have more synthetic type organs that there's a homogenization of sound in melodic improvisation today. I mean, it's hard to tell who anybody is, and there's a variety of reasons for that. And one of them is just this sort of, I wanted to ask you about a guy that's in my heart right now. I had a chance to go to his apartment in New York a few years ago. We did a great interview. I talked to him, and I know he's from Puerto Rico. I'm wondering, did you ever cross paths with Ray Mantilla?
I did, years and years ago.
He calls himself a New Yorican,
Yeah, well, that's a very common term.
Yeah, no, because I mean, he talked about when he first came there, when he was living up in the Bronx, maybe. I mean, he said 3/4 every single person had drums. They were outside on the stoop playing drums. I mean, it was just part of that lineage, part of that heritage, part of the culture. And now that doesn't really. I just wonder what you see for the future of. I feel like we're sort of at a point now where probably the only thing that can really save us as a civilization is rhythm. And I don't even know if it'll save us. We might have to completely all sort of just go back to, everything has to collapse, and then we'll go back to the indigenous roots of musicians as doctors and healers. But rhythm, polyrhythms, human rhythm is key to enlightenment. And I just wonder what you see as, what does the future of melodic improvisation hold? I mean, is there an opportunity for new vocabulary to grow in music, or have we gotten to the point where we're saturated with so much visual material, so much mediocre material that people are just comping, and and then not really ever finding their real. And the other thing is, there's plenty of people that have found their individual voice, and the question is, can that be monetized anymore, or is society all about regurgitation and playing? Individuality is not going to sell anymore. I'm just curious about your thoughts on this as we move forward.
Well, I don't know. It seems like I always find myself going back to the basics, man. Like, if you go back to, that's why I like the tunes of the 30s and 40s, and both in jazz and what I guess what was what they call the Great American Songbook, so to speak. I always find myself enjoying playing. I always enjoyed playing songs from that era, 30s, 40s, but not only with those composers like Cole Porter's, the Gershwins, but also the jazz composers, man, like the tunes from that era. It's very okay. There was a sax player. His name was Al Cohn.
Oh my God!
Yeah. Well, his son Joe. He and I were at Berkeley together. He was a ridiculous guitar player, and he's been in New York for years now. Wow. And one night he invited me to a place called Cleopatra's Needle. It's up on the Upper West Side. There was some band players. Let's go check this guy, because it was Eddie Henderson, trumpet player.
Oh my! I've done two great. I've been to his house up in Westchester. I love the guy.
Yes, Dr. Eddie Henderson.
Dude, the doctor of psychiatry, man.
Yeah, and he's a killer trumpet player.
Dude, he is the most ridiculous. He was running sprints against. He had. Growing up, I mean, he had all the cats in his house. His dad was Miles Davis's doctor.
Mm-hmm. So this particular night, we went there, and it was Eddie's group. He was in the group, but Joe and I are standing there, and the band is playing, and it's like whoever wrote these charts, these tunes, it's like I am very serious about music form. That's why a lot of those songs are very big. They have 4-bar phrases, 4-bar phrase, a 4-bar phrase, a 4-bar phrase, and then a bridge. And the human brain likes to see. That's why most people, like for instance, if we're looking at paintings, most people are going to be enjoying like those paintings that you can see form, structure. Their theme flows together. I mean, I enjoy abstract, but abstract to me is like, okay, yeah, I appreciate for what it is. But so back to the story is that whoever wrote this particular tune that we were listening to is like he's telling the audience, "Wow, man, check out how many chords I know, from a major 7 to a this, and that chord. I'm looking for a structure, and I'm not finding it." Okay, so Joe turns to me and said, "Man, music's supposed to be fun. This is not fun. It's like I'm looking. It's about looking and finding. You're looking for a structure, and you find the structure. It's right there. You look at a building like the Empire State Building. It has a beginning, it has structure in the middle, and it has an end, clear as daylight, right? That said, I find that a lot of writers today are writing stuff that is more like, trying to impress other musicians. Check this shit out.
Right, you're nailing it, dude. You're nailing it. Yeah,
that's it. Check this out, man. Check this. No, check this out. No, check this. And a million notes. And wow, check out how many notes I know. And I say, yeah, man, but that's nice, but.
Well, no, because Alan Schwartzberg, the great drummer, said music has become an inside joke for musicians.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's what did Joe say? He said, "Man, music's supposed to be fun. I'm just watching this.
This is not fun."
because there's no feeling to it. You know, there's no real feel. It doesn't go into the primordial gut. It's some sort of intellectual exercise about look at how much I know. Look at my facility. Look at my technique. You know.
Yeah, it's like one of my favorite players as a trumpet player, or on trumpet, is Chet Baker.
Oh.
When you listen to Chet, first of all, that sound not as effortless. I mean, he's not playing anything much further than a 9-chord, you know, but he's playing all this stuff that flows. And I think, you know, somebody say, yeah, but Chet, you know, he can't read. And Jerry Mulligan said, well, he doesn't need to.
Yeah, you know, but again, you know, think about it. It's simple, but yet it's also, think about the drums of those records. I mean, I think back to Roy Brooks playing on those records, Kirk Lightsey, all these heroes of mine. Dude, it was all accompanist instruments. I mean, even in today's recording jazz scene, the drums are too loud in the mix, always. So you're never, you know, it almost feels like you're fighting for sonic attention. And it's just not, you know, Rodrigo, I have to ask you, my recorder's about to run out, but I would love to do set 2 with you maybe in the next week or two if you're up for it.
Absolutely. Name the date.
Hey, man. Also, I'm going to be back in New York Sunday, October 6th. I don't know if you live in the city or not, but it would be cool to grab a cup of coffee or something.
I would like that. Yeah.
It'd be fun, man. Yeah. Johnny V has been a soul uncle and somebody just, I love him very dearly, and I know he loves you, so it would be really cool to meet in person, man.
Wonderful, man.
Hey, yeah, man, I had a ball. I had an absolute ball, man. Thank you for enlightening.
This is great. Yeah, this is a lot of fun. I had a lot of stuff, you know, little
yeah, no, it's. I mean, listen. The point is, you go out and say, "My God, I was talking about stuff I haven't thought about since that time." You know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. Let's plan on doing. Just give me a call or
yeah, I'll text you, man. We'll do something in person next time. We'll do part 2 in person.
That'd be great. Let me ask you this.
Sure.
Are you going to work on this? You're going to fix it or cut it or do something? Probably not. I don't know.
I mean, dude, Rodrigo, I've done 2,000 interviews. I've never edited it. I mean, you know, unless you want. The only times
No. Absolutely. I'm just curious. But I was thinking if you could send it to me, I'd love to have it.
Rodrigo, it's going to be going up to the public all over the place, dude. As soon as it goes up, I'll send it out. I'll send you a link. I'll send you a raw copy, but I'll also, it's going to go up on Spotify and YouTube too, so it's all over the place.
Beautiful.
Yeah, man.
That's great.
That's great. Yeah, bless you, man. Have a beautiful weekend, and thank you for taking the time, man.
You too. Oh, man, thank you so much. You really made my week, man, my rest of the year and all that. Thank you so much. Man.
Bless you, brother.
I got to call Johnny.
Yo, call Johnny. Let him know you had a ball, all right?
Will do.
All right, dude. Be cool, man.
All right, Jake.
Later.
You too, bro.
Bye.